where, working at a reseller, we had started building kind of prepackaged building blocks, and then lo and behold, and I won't go naming them, not trying to sell them to anybody, but lo and behold, it became a thing that the industry kind of picked up on and said, wait a minute, this would probably be a lot easier if we just threw everything in a box and could reuse that and gain all the benefits from that and extend those out to all of our customers as well.
What was their reaction to it? Did it have the uptake that you thought it would when you pulled it together, or was it slower than you thought, or what was the adoption?
You know what, Shannon, that's a fantastic question, because certainly myself and all the engineers in the room thought it was an amazing idea, just for our own time's sake. And I'll tell you, the sales team had some trouble pushing it, and we still see now, several years later, where it's just kind of hitting its stride with some of the converged and hyper-converged vendors out there.
Do you think it was a matter of it just not being technically ready for prime time?
Yeah, I think I think it was a combination of factors. First, just new idea, and maybe just not vetted out well enough across the ecosystem. Second, as we're seeing, and as I know we'll be talking about here, and I'm sure VMware will be talking about, the industry IT as a whole is really just moving towards embracing applications and moving away from the infrastructure. And I think part of that mental shift also involves now looking at the infrastructure as building blocks instead of this monolithic, massive, complex thing that we need to work with and manage at a very hands-on level.
Yeah, that's very true, I think. So, Josh, I want to get your thoughts on this too, but also I want you to add in that last bullet point we have here, which is something else that we're seeing is sort of this overlapping of DR and backup capability as well.
Sure. So, I mean, in terms of convergence and hyperconvergence, I think this is almost yesterday's problem in that it's a bit of a no-brainer. If you go back to the way it was before, where you'd go and buy servers, storage, networking, try and rate each of the components individually, glue it all together and cross your fingers that it meets your requirements, that's obviously not the right way to do it. And now you have these pre-packaged builds in the VCE type blocks or your actual converged appliances. It's obviously a no-brainer, and that's why you're seeing the shift to that, because they're rated to a certain spec, performance profile. You just buy enough of them, slot them together. But as I said, I believe they're very much a solution to yesterday's problem, because the new problem becomes is how do you manage all these different blocks? How do you avoid being tied into one specific vendor as they maybe go down a different route? And how do you leverage all the different pieces of hardware that you might already have? So it really is a stepping stone that all of the hardware is gonna be converged and certified to a certain performance rating or VM count, etc. But where it will evolve to is everything becoming software defined and the hardware being completely commoditized underneath, and whether it's scale up or scale out won't really matter, because everything will be driven at the software layer. So yes, we'll continue to see all these guys pushing their hardware, but don't be surprised to see more and more of them go to the software layer, because as we all know, everything moves forward, becomes software defined, and hardware fades into the background. And in terms of DR and backup, if we dial it back to what the business need actually is, no business actually says we need backup. The business says we need to protect our data, no matter what. It might be from a logical failure on site, like a database corruption, or even the data center going offline altogether. We need to be able to recover that data and the applications, and we need to retain it for compliance. And it just so happens that the only way to really do that is traditionally with backup solutions. But as replication evolves and you get the continuous data protection solutions in the market that you have today, where you can recover any file, any VM, or any application from points in time down to the second, and then keep that data over any retention period that you define. At no point in that have I said the word backup, but it's removed the need for a backup altogether. So we definitely see a convergence in DR and backup, and a blurred lines where you don't really need one or the other. You simply need your data, your applications protected, recoverable in increments in seconds to minimize data loss, and retention that meets your compliance needs, all in one simple software solution.
Great, great. So an important thing just happened. Michael Brighton, I think your last name, if I've messed it up, Michael, I apologize. He recognized the graphic, and so I'm very, very happy about that. Does anyone else on the panel know where this graphic comes from?
I can't say I do.
It's a Coverdale Page album. So there we go. David Coverdale and Jimmy Page. Thank you, Michael. That made my day. All right, so I've got for the audience a poll, and we're going to have like some topics. Then I'm going to throw a poll at you for you to give us some feedback on what your thoughts are on each of the topics. So I'm going to launch the Are You Considering a Converged Platform poll? And if you would, please just answer what you think, and then we'll do some feedback. While we're doing that poll, I do want to pull in Christian here. And Christian, from you know, you're looking at large and work with large cloud service providers. So we wanted your perspective on, you know, not just the enterprise perspective and looking at it from a customer out, but we wanted to look at it also from a cloud service provider or a large IT based on services model, what they think as well. So I wanted to pull you in here and get what you thought, what you see with the convergence. Is it staying at the hardware? Are we seeing, like what Josh was talking about, is it's all being driven more towards the software to where they can just get commoditized hardware? What are some of the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, appreciate it, Shannon. I think absolutely hyper convergence is a major topic for most of the service providers that I work with. I think cloud service providers, simply due to the nature of their business, are always looking for ways to simplify architecture or streamline operations and lower costs. With that said, I think the majority of the service providers that I interact with are still somewhat in the discovery or the exploratory phase, and so an event like VMworld is a great opportunity for them to interact with all the different providers in one central location. I can also think of several providers that I work with who have already made the leap into leveraging hyper-converged infrastructure pieces and are using technologies like, you know, VMware's vSAN or Nutanix or Pivot3, et cetera. I expect that as these technologies continue to improve their feature sets and their existing storage platforms and investments go end of life, that we're only going to see this adoption continue to increase. I do know that they're heavily weighing out several, you know, considerations that they have to make as a service provider. For instance, typically, you know, even with a solution like a disaster recovery solution, sometimes their storage needs can outpace their needs for additional compute. So I know a lot of them are trying to grapple with, you know, the ability to do more granular upgrades in terms of storage without having to do that same with the compute side. So while there's definitely some considerations, I definitely see that adoption only increasing here over time.
Okay, very good. And it almost sounds like, from what I'm seeing so far on the poll results, which we'll talk about here in a second, I want to give everybody a final chance here just to pick your choice on the poll, and I'm getting ready to close it, and just want to give everybody time to give us some feedback. And looks like we're getting close to. This is interesting. So let's talk about the results as they come in. Are you considering a converged platform? So the top answer right now with 54% is that yes, we are considering it, and close to 21% though actually comes in at yes, they're already running some converged platforms. So that's actually a larger percentage than I was guessing it would be this early on. And then 23% said no, and actually 25% of this went up. And then 2%, now 5% says they think that it leads to vendor lock-in. So that is one thing I did want to bring up on this one to any of you guys, Josh, Sean, Tim. Where do you see on the convergence? In a way, I think VMware is actually going the opposite direction in a way of their virtualization company getting into the hardware business. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about EVO, Sean?
Oh, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that.
Yeah,
we can move on to Tim. Yeah.
Yeah, so with Evo Rail, it's kind of interesting since they've got all their different hardware partners hopping on board with them. So they're kind of like half of a hardware vendor, it seems like, with the solutions that they're providing. I think we've got Huawei, HP, just a good. I think there's 5 or 6 different hardware vendors pushing out Evo Rail. Which I think is a fantastic hyper-converged product. So you're not so much locked in, but I think in other solutions too, you're getting some vendor lock-in. I think more so on the converged side than the hyper-converged.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Because of the dependency on the hardware side?
Yeah, with the converged side and the dependency on the hardware, I mean, since you're sticking with a particular vendor for storage and a particular vendor for your compute hardware, it would just make sense to continue sticking with them with your expansion needs. Otherwise, you're kind of jumping out of your block. And
Right.
But yeah, with these software-defined solutions now with the hyper-converged, it's hardware is just a commodity anymore, and the brains are the important part.
That's true. We see that every day with Zerto. I mean, where we're hardware agnostic. It really does. There's a great sense of freedom with customers of being able to use pretty much anything they want. All right, so I'm going to close the poll on this one because we got more coming up. So let's close the poll and let's see. All right. So the final result there. Let's see. Share. Yeah. All right. So here's the final results of the poll. So it came in at 20%. They're already running it. We've already got one. And then, yes, we're considering it, 49%. So the message is resonating. And then no. And then a little bit more color on the no answer was leading to vendor lock. So thanks, everybody, for participating in the poll. And then we'll move on to the next topic. And, all right. Go away from Coverdale page. And go to containers. These were just the questions I think that we've covered greatly, so I'm going to move on to the next item. And the next item is talking about containers, containerization, because we hear a whole lot about a certain product that does containers. So Sean, if you would talk a little bit about what you see, what are some of the big vendors, what are containers? First of all, let's do that first, Sean.
Absolutely, yeah. A little bit more my speed. I definitely love the application side of the world now. Quick high level, containers, basically it's another way to say, and probably a much easier way to say, isolated runtime space. And depending on the container provider, you could be talking about doing like user level isolation or service level or process level isolation. So that you can basically run multiple applications or services or even processes that are isolated or restricted from each other, but still leveraging the same underlying kernel and resources like CPU and RAM and so on, right? So, a great example of this, I think, from the VMware side of the house, whether people maybe don't always think of it this way, but it's actually Synapse itself. Is absolutely and has been for many, many years a containerization tool. The ability to say, okay, I want to run Word on any like system. Cool, I'm going to Synapse it and throw it out there on a shared drive or maybe deliver it through Citrix, for example. Certainly prior to that, we were doing stuff with Zones and Solaris. But the big ones now are really, of course, the whale, literally and figuratively, Docker. or Google as well getting out there into the ecosystem with their funny one, let me contain that for you.
Nice. Could hardly contain yourself over that one. All right, so yes, I said it. So yeah, Docker is definitely. So Tim, what do you see as the benefits, drawbacks of a container? Let's say a Docker sort of deployment, and particularly let's pair it up with our audience, which is I'm a virtualization admin. I'm working with VMware, Hyper-V, something that's OS app. I've got to virtualize. Everything's working fine, and containers come along. What if I'm that person? What's the benefit of me considering containers, and what are the big drawbacks that you see?
Well, I think as a virtualization administrator, sometimes we kind of get caught up on, well, my VMs are what I do, and it's Windows or Linux, and but now with containers, it's simply just another workload next to those servers, and really we're just running virtualization at the OS level to separate out. That's one of the benefits is containers are going to scale nicely, so your workload is no longer just a particular server or a set of servers. You can scale your containers up and down as demand needs with much less overhead than you would if you were spinning up additional database servers, additional web front servers. So we're just really bringing that down to the level of only what we need to scale instead of scaling and using more resources to get the same performance.
Yeah, very good point. So I want to pull Josh in on this. So Josh, if you were, we see this trend with Microsoft and VMware. They're both embracing the concept of containers. So I'll ask you the question, put yourself in their shoes. What do they see as the benefits and drawbacks of containers? And why is it that they both are being very open to making sure that they support containerization?
So I think that the key thing to point out here is from any virtualization admin point of view, whether you are au fait or not with containers and whether you want to use them or not doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you're not going to be the guy that actually creates these in the first place. It is going to be driven from development and a DevOps culture where they are building new applications, new front ends that scale up and down, and they might want to deliver them with these new containerization technologies. But then the reason that the likes of Microsoft, VMware, AWS are all jumping on the ship Me Too is because they don't want to get left behind. And in the world of a virtualization admin, really, the question people are asking is, does this remove the need for a hypervisor? Well, on a technical level, yes, it does. But if you think of it realistically in how are you going to manage these today, if you had a new application in the next 6 to 12 months that did rely on containerization technology, how are you going to fit that into your environment? How are you going to manage it? How are you going to back it up? How are you going to protect it? And how are you going to make sure that it consumes resources in line with the other services you might have running? And the simple answer is, then for most environments, I see them starting with containerization by putting it in virtual machines. There's no reason that you can't put these technologies in a VM and treat it like anything else. But the important thing to be aware of is that takes many, many years. And two, it is going to increase in usage, but probably starting off in production, especially in the form of VMs, because the final point there is that while there is a lot of buzz about it, there's a lot of talk. If you ask anybody who talks about containerization, are you running anything in production, more often than not they say no, and when they do, I anticipate it as at least in the beginning on-premise to be in virtualized environments.
It's interesting you bring that up because now I want to launch the next poll, which is asking, are you considering containerization? So we'll get some live results here while Christian. And I want to bring in your point of view. You probably are working with the side of it, which are the cloud service providers, which are the ones most likely to use this beforehand, before other maybe enterprises would. So Christian, are you seeing much uptake of Docker, or a lot of conversations around, I'll call it Docker because that's sort of the buzzword of it, but Linux containers, Docker. Do you have a lot of, or hear a lot about from the cloud service provider side yet, but at least the ones you're working with?
Yes, I think definitely. I think Josh summed it up nicely in that, at this point, no service provider really wants to get left behind. So I think for the most part, they're trying to figure out how to kind of take these customer considerations in terms of containers and how they either integrate that into their existing platforms or what type of changes they need to make to their architecture to allow people the type of visibility and freedoms they would need in the environments to leverage those technologies. So absolutely, I think it's a major focal point of a lot of service providers, and once again, just another way for them to create a offering that's going to help differentiate themselves from other providers out there.
Right, be a lot more flexible. So right now, just a running poll. If you haven't voted, please do. We've got half of you voted so far, so it's pretty good, pretty quick. So please go ahead and go to the poll section of. Actually, it's popped up right in front of you. So go ahead and vote, and then I'll close the poll out here in just a second. But just while finishing up here, right now it's trending toward. We have 4% currently that are already using containers. So for those 4% out there, I'd love if you want to just post in the question section of what app are you using or how are you using the container. I'd love to hear the use case for it. But then also we got 28% saying yes, but it's going to be a while before they're ready. And then we have 41% saying yes, but we don't know enough about them yet. So there is that momentum idea of not getting left behind. So we don't know enough about them. We understand conceptually, but we do plan on incorporating them in some capacity. And then we have 25% that says no, we don't have a need right now, and this is the ongoing with majority of the votes are coming in. So we'll close this poll out in just a second. If you would, just go ahead and make your choice, and then we'll look at the final results. But while we're waiting on the final, I'll just do a run through. Anyone else want to make a comment from the panel while we finish up the next, say, 10, 15 seconds?
Yeah, I think the I don't know enough about them answer is actually quite common. And I think that's one of the almost downsides of containers right now is as cool and as hip as they are, I suppose, out there and what they can actually do, it seems like there's not enough word or getting out there to how it actually works and what the benefits actually are. And so to a lot of people and a lot of my customers too, they're just this buzzword of something that they don't quite understand yet or how it could even affect them at all.
Okay, so let's close the poll. Let's share it. And
I think just to add one thing there, actually, I found what really brought it home to me, and all of a sudden it clicked, is it's a container is simply the services you need to run that web app or that back-end application, and the services that it needs only. You strip away the OS, you strip away all the bloat, you just have the services, and it's all managed by automation and scripts. There's no real GUI interaction, and that is pretty much services with stuff bolted on, and there you go. And that is, in that context, it makes a bit more sense for me.
Yeah, and I think this audience particularly, you see that there is a tendency to appreciate abstracting, hardware and now the OS from something. So it looks like, we're looking at the trend there. It's mostly yes. 23% says they don't have the need, and then They've just got too many other investments in other infrastructures. Was around 26%. So that's quite interesting. So let's move on to the next topic. Hybrid clouds. So I'll give it a second to pop up on the screen as we move through the slides. So of course, I think we all are immersed in the idea of hybrid clouds. So quickly, Tim, if you want to give us what is hybrid cloud, then I'll have Sean follow up.
Yeah, so a hybrid cloud is really a much simpler concept than containers, isn't it? So it's really just a way to take your on-premises cloud or compute and be integrated in with an off-site cloud provider, an off-premises compute structure. So a hybrid cloud really is just you're integrating a cloud service that uses both your private and public to each do distinct functions for you, and allowing you to move your workloads off and on premises as needed.
Right. So Sean, just want to get your thoughts there on some of the key use cases that we're showing here.
Absolutely. I think it's certainly going to depend on the organization. They're typically used to extend capacity. Especially commonly, a lot of the times we're talking about storage in our neck of the woods, right? So looking at adding additional storage capacity, or it could be compute capacity somewhere else, and we just don't have the footprint in our on-premises environment any longer. Could be used more and more in the case of things like the Amazon public cloud, Google public cloud, the Azure public cloud, to gain capabilities in your infrastructure that you just can't deliver yourself, whether that's for cost or footprint or any other reason. Last, for me at least, and certainly near and dear to my heart, being here at Zerto, is actually for risk mitigation. More and more organizations I'm finding that we're speaking with are actually leveraging different hybrid cloud models to shift their risk around based on different physical or logical events, whether in the geographic location or just in their environment.
So I think it's interesting too that as we were talking about this before the webinar, Christian had brought up something about, and Christian, I want you to comment on this, about the trend we're talking about here is the trends of VMworld, and of course they're hitting the ready for any, which of course is meaning their version of this concept. So Christian, what are some of your comments around the idea of hybrid cloud?
Definitely, I would think it's pretty safe to say that the majority of people that are attending VMworld these days, or especially this year, will have already invested or have already made an investment with VMware in terms of having virtualized their local infrastructure. And like several other people on the panel have mentioned, they're now looking to burst beyond their own internal infrastructure and resources to consume resources and services as needed through public cloud providers. I know there's a slide that I really like that I've been using from a Gartner survey over the last year or so that estimated that I think over 70% of enterprises were going to be pursuing a hybrid cloud approach in 2015, and I think that definitely rings true. Somewhat selfishly, obviously this is great news for us here at Zerto, as a lot of these organizations will look at DR as a kind of a way of dipping their toes into the hybrid cloud approach. So I think that's why there's such a focus on a lot of the infrastructure of service providers out there to build robust DR as a service offerings, as they realize this is a popular entry point for a lot of enterprises out there. And I think obviously,
and you're working directly with the other side of it, aren't you? I mean, the DR as a service portion of whatever your environment is, I mean, that's the people you work with every day, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Obviously, we all know that a major talk track or a lot of sessions at VMworld will revolve around, VMware's offering, their vCloud Air offering and their network. But obviously here at Zerto, we have over 200 cloud service providers who are leveraging Zerto to deliver service, and quite a few of those are going to be at VMworld. So I strongly encourage everyone to stop by their booths as well a lot of these providers have been offering these types of services for well over 5 to 7 years, and obviously they have a tremendous amount of breadth and depth to their offerings.
Yeah, and I do want to bring Josh in on this one too. Josh, when Christian talks about the fact that we have over 200 cloud service providers, along with our enterprise customers, but having that many cloud service providers, I want you to contrast that, if you would, with our view of hybrid versus what maybe VMware views hybrid.
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is, it's very obvious why VMware came out with vCloud Air, and it's very much like the containerization and Docker that they don't want to get left behind. They don't want to be stuck in these physical on-premise installations when in the next few years you might see more and more use cases and environments where, the idea of simply putting all this kit on site, going through all this installation and testing it out for a couple of weeks, and only then can you deploy your new set of applications for this new test dev team to build a new app or whatever it is. You can simply go online, whether it's a hybrid cloud, fully public, whatever it is, put your credit card details in and spin up the VMs in a few minutes. And obviously VMware don't want to get left behind on that. But the key thing is, and this is why the VMware vCloud Air is a great thing for Zerto, is that I'm sure it's going to be a big topic at VMworld. Everyone's going to be asking about vCloud Air. Does Zerto work with vCloud Air? And no, we don't work with vCloud Air directly itself, because that's a single set of data centers managed solely by VMware. But we do work with the vCloud Air network. In fact, I believe the majority of the vCloud Air network today utilizes Zerto to offer DR as a service, and also hosting your VMs and then protecting them between the cloud providers' data centers with Zerto. And it really just gives you choice. With vCloud Air, you only have one choice, and that's VMware. And with Zerto, you have the choice of our 200 Zerto cloud service providers, where they're giving you more than just, for example, DR and the replication. They're giving you all the managed services around that you need to consider as part of DR, for example, like building dev test environments on the fly from your replicated data. How do you handle the networking for disaster recovery? How do you actually access those applications after you've recovered them? So for hybrid cloud and the vCloud Air network, all we see is this is great traction for us, great awareness, and Zerto enables choice rather than lock into individual clouds.
Yeah, great. So now I want to launch a poll on and call it, do you have or are you planning on using hybrid cloud? And while we're getting results on that, Sean, I want you to talk a little bit about, our definition of hybrid includes not just what a managed service provider can do, but also we've introduced going to public cloud. So if you want to talk a little bit about how that helps push and redefine, or further define hybrid, how we approach it, going to public cloud.
Will do. So, and I think it's important to kind of briefly romp through what's been looked at hybrid cloud up until today. So you've got your on-premises data center. Maybe you've been using a colo. Maybe you've been using a managed service provider. Maybe you've been leveraging a cloud provider for bursting or disaster recovery, backup needs, and so on. And all of those, after just having stuff in your own rack, of course, are different hybrid cloud models, right? But they've got different management levels, different resource capabilities, different contractual obligations, and all this other stuff. And to Joshua's point, one of the newer movements is the capability I've got as an end user, or certainly as an IT administrator, to simply go on, for example, Amazon, plug in my credit card info, and start spinning up servers. There's a very small handful of cloud providers who offer services like that as well, but typically not at the demand or response capacity of a company like Amazon. And with Zerto today, in Zerto 4.0, being able to now target and leverage AWS, Amazon Web Services, as a DR as a service target, and we've been able to use them for our backups as well for about a year now. You can now have your own kind of data center to data center replication and protection and recovery. You can have your own, managed services, colo, cloud service provider model as well. But if you really need to at the end of the day, or if you're looking to explore Amazon, or if you're all the way down the road of saying our company's moving our data up to Amazon, regardless of those models, you can simply leverage Zerto to move that data, protect that data, get those applications where they need to be.
Yes, and it kind of, to us, defines any as a lot more than just a limited, maybe single offering any, perhaps. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here and give everybody about 5 more seconds to hit the vote button if you'd like, and then we'll look at the results of do you plan or do you have or do you plan on using a hybrid cloud? And so I'm going to close the results. And I'm going to share them. So let's look at this. So we have 29% already using hybrid clouds, and then yes. So we have the abundance of the audience. It's a reality. People are going to be using hybrid clouds. Now it becomes like this conversation, what we're talking about. What degree do you want to use it? Do you want to have it truly platform independent, and or do you want to? You're worried about vendor lock-in, and then we've got the no, and a valid no there is just the concept of having data out of the control, and so we see the trends, particularly this audience, I would think, would embrace hybrid cloud because that message has been around for a while, and plus technically we have maybe a little better appreciation that it is possible and so on. So I want to move on to another topic here, and it's the idea of complexity. So let's build this out so we can talk about it. If we look at sort of the state of things as they are in the enterprise IT, and Tim, I know you probably see this firsthand every day personally. When you look at it in this respect of all the different influencers, so you could have MSPs, on-premise workloads, public cloud, and then just next generation stuff, what's coming next in SaaS. When you look at this, would you tend to agree, disagree that things are getting more complex?
Yeah, I would certainly agree that things are definitely getting more complex out there, especially with the introduction of containers coming out there. Organizations anymore aren't just sitting around with a handful of servers in the basement running a domain and a couple file servers. I mean, we've got our hybrid clouds, we've got Exchange farms, SharePoint farms. We might have Hyper-V running at one location, VMware running at the other location, and I think it's just going to continue to get a little more complicated with each year as these new solutions are popping out and new ways of doing things. But you're also going to have to, stick around with the ways that you've been doing it. So we've got a lot of ways that we have to tie quite a bit of these technologies together. And in my job, I'm grateful enough that I can just focus on quite a small subset of technology, and I've got others on the team that can focus on those. So it's, when we've got a whole solution, we're engaging quite a bit of people, and so it gets complex, that's for sure.
Definitely, and so the reason why I put this in here was so we could talk about this slide, which is the concept that you'll be hearing from Zerto at VMworld about, which is the cloud continuity platform. And the concept here is to become the federation device or glue or whatever you want to call it that allows you to work between all these different platforms. Now, do we do that today? Absolutely not. But this last version, we've added in Hyper-V, we've added in AWS, and it shows a clear roadmap of where we are headed. So when we look at the main trends and topics of what's coming at VMworld, we certainly we see it, and we see the lack of connectivity and the increased complexity in a lot of these systems. I do want to open up another poll while we finish up on this topic, and it is just gauging from the audience, our infrastructure is too complex. You know, we've done a lot towards simplification with virtualization and with a lot of the convergence that we're talking about, because the idea there is simplification. But I just want to get a little bit of a view here from the audience about the amount of complexity and what their view of it is as well. And this will be a short poll, so if you would, please vote. And so right now the results are, this is interesting. So the results right now are hovering anywhere from 35 to 40% saying, no, I like a challenge. So we have a lot of consultants on, I see. All right, so we'll close this poll out, and we'll take a look at the results, and then we'll move on to the next topic. So yeah, let me share them. All right, so 18% say the new capabilities are great, but it's too much. Heads exploding. And then 50% agrees that it is, but they're willing to learn because it's worth the effort. And then we've got no, I like a challenge, and no people to handle that stuff. So we have 4% that are in management. All right, let's move on to the next. Thanks everybody for responding with both and giving us some instant feedback on our topics. So let's look at the last one here, and this is trends from Zerto, and it's this concept of more than DR. And the whole idea of more than DR is something, Josh, that we sort of came up with as a result of basically different folks, you know, asking and talking about, well, you know, we can also do this, and we can also do migrations, and we can do DR. And so we put together this slide, and Josh, if you would just briefly sort of go around the block here and talk about a few of the highlights of things that the Cloud Continuity Platform, and some of the things that makes Zerto more than DR.
Sure, so I'll go reasonably quick because we're starting to run out of time, but the key concept here is not just replicating and protecting your data, it's what you can do with Zerto thereafter. And so if you look at all the features that we bring to the table, you can start to see how they can expand on the use cases. So for example, with application updates and upgrades, the failover testing in Zerto, you can click to start a test in minutes, have all the VMs online in the recovery site, test all of your application updates, your upgrades, ensure that they work, and then put that in your change control form when it asks, have you tested this? Yes, I tested it a few minutes ago with Zerto and it worked fine. But you're doing this without shutting down the VMs in production or breaking the replication. So it's just making that common task much easier. And Zerto also allows you to roll back out of a faulty application upgrade or update if it was to still go wrong even after your testing. For migrations, both on-premise or as an on-ramp to the cloud, everything that makes Zerto great for DR makes it just as great for migrations because the migrated data is seconds of lag behind production. You can click to fail over hundreds of virtual machines at once if you so need, and you can actually test that migration before you actually migrate with the same feature of the failover testing. For dev test environments, we have an offsite clone feature in Zerto where you simply select the application or the protection group, you select the point in time, select a target location, and we will build out copies of your applications which you can use for long-term testing or to easily build out copies of those apps for dev environments. And if you put all of these together, it really does start to enable innovation in your data center because you can consume all of these via API or PowerShell, and then you can start to automate some of these processes that were previously manual. We have another push on always restore, and if you look at the Zerto journal-based protection with our offsite backup capability, which gives you a third copy, it ensures that no matter what happens with the replicated data, if you were to, for example, have a dual site failure, which does happen, then in one solution you have that third copy. You can efficiently share services. We have a lot of features that are traditionally deployed by our large cloud providers, but they can also be consumed by enterprises with maybe multiple departments or business organizations where you can start to divvy up and share out the resources for disaster recovery and give users the ability to manage disaster recovery of their own applications. Cloud bursting is very much tied up, in my opinion, into on-ramp into the cloud, where you can use Zerto to move applications up there and then burst from there on onwards. Recover from disasters is obviously the primary use of Zerto, and I don't really need to cover that. I don't think at this point everybody knows that. But also, true hybrid cloud is an important point in that with Zerto, you're not tied in at any level. If you wanted to have your on-premise infrastructure paired with your DR data center, a Zerto cloud service provider, and Amazon Web Services simultaneously, then you can. And then you can simply select on a per workload basis the target data center that you want to replicate to for DR, or you want to migrate the virtual machines to for permanent running or for building out test dev. And it really does enable true hybrid cloud because you can tier your protection depending on the SLAs that you need and the priority of those applications and workloads.
That's great. So hopefully this sort of encapsulates, I know there's a whole lot thrown at this concept, but hopefully it encapsulates the previous topics, as far as the convergence of how to deal with that, because you're going to have different platforms that you still need to back up, still need to migrate, still need to do recoveries. But then also looking at the hybrid cloud and the way we define hybrid cloud and the use case of it, of being able to go cross platforms. And then we looked at that cloud continuity platform, some of the complexity pieces, but hopefully what we've conveyed here is how our roadmap and the way that we are working toward is to help simplify by using the same user interface. So Josh, as you were talking about this is all done with the same user interface across all these platforms. So that's a very important point that we don't want to get lost, because you can do all these different things, but oftentimes it causes you to go to 4 or 5 different UIs. All right, so thanks, Josh, for that. Now, yeah, we had one thing won't be talked about. We'll have to go quickly on this since we're out, but we don't think you'll see a whole lot about Hyper-V or AWS. There's probably other topics that I could certainly take a follow on, but that's one thing that you will be hearing from us in our booth is about our support for Hyper-V, AWS, and all the other what can Zerto do for you topics. And that's the reason why we want to bring up this last slide here, which is if you're at VMworld, please come to booth 623 Monday night. If you can join us, and make sure you get there early because it's filling up fast. Is Monday night we've got a party. We're featuring a cover band called Killer Queens. And Sean, I understand you've checked them out before, and we're happy with the Killer Queens.
Totally awesome. Check them out on YouTube.
Great. So check out the Killer Queens on YouTube. It's great that we have a better band than what VMware is actually bringing to the table. So we're happy about that. I would like to thank everyone.
Shannon, sorry, who are VMware getting for the band?
Alabama Shakes and some other bunch of scrubs. So sorry, I think they're probably pretty good bands, but we're on par with what VMware's bringing up, certainly. And who doesn't love Queens? And for the guy that knew Covered Up Page cover album, I'm sure he knows Queens on. So I want to thank everybody on the panel: Christian, Tim, Sean, Josh. Thanks everyone for participating in the polls. The results were quite interesting, and hope everybody enjoyed the preview of VMworld. If you're not going to be there, be sure to go to our website, zerto.com, and check out our blog post. And Tim, thank you very much. And thanks to all the other presenters. And everyone have a great day.